Hello, everybody. Welcome to another session of Come Cloud with Us. I'm your host, Abdul, and I have my co-host, Chris. Hey, Chris, how's it going?
Doing well, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, you man, looks like Santa.
I know. This is probably the last few weeks with summit coming up and stuff. I need a travel beard, so this is way too much maintenance. Way too much. But how are
I,
you?
Doing good. Thanks a lot. Yeah, it's been busy. Okay, so uh, with that being said, let's get into the introductions. Uh, so I'll let Kaslin introduce herself first.
all right. Hello, and thank you everyone for watching today. I'm Kaslin Fields, and I'm a developer advocate at Google Cloud. I'm also host of the Kubernetes podcast from Google. That's the podcaster voice. I'm also a co-chair of the special interest group for contributor experience in open source Kubernetes and a Cloud Native Computing Foundation ambassador. And I'm excited to be here today to talk about platform engineering.
Did you practice that voice? It's great. It just come naturally as soon
Over
as you get a
time.
podcast. Yeah.
I think so, yeah. Kind of comes iteratively.
Awesome.
Do we want to pass around the horn to each other?
Yeah, I'll
Yeah,
just go right
and
in the circle.
Okay.
It's fine. Yeah.
yeah.
Would you like to go next, Whitney?
I would love to. Hello, my name is Whitney Lee. I'm a developer advocate at Tanzu. I host a lot of shows too, but they're a streaming show, so I don't have the voice. Because there's video involved, I guess, somehow. I guess I'll start practicing. So I do a show called Enlightening, where I use the light board that you see here behind me. I do a show, I am one of the hosts of Cloud Native Live because I'm a CNCF ambassador. And I also co-host a show called You Choose alongside Victor Farsick on this DevOps Toolkit YouTube channel. And for that one, it's a choose your own adventure style journey through the CNCF landscape, where each episode is a different system design choice. And then at the end, the audience votes about which tool they want to use to implement in our ongoing demo. I feel like I've said enough about myself, but I've also been instructed to say what talks I have coming up. So I have a couple at KubeCon. One is for Platform Engineering Day. It's called Sometimes Lipstick is Exactly What a Pig Needs. And the other one is a Choose Your Own Adventure talk I'm doing with Victor for KubeCon proper about security tools. And with that, Marino, take it away.
I cannot compete with you two. Y'all have just fantastic voices and probably audio setups too. My name is Marino Wijay. I live in the intersection of open source Kubernetes networking and cloud. So when we talk about platform engineering, I am here. I am here for it. I've got no talks coming up. Actually, no. That's a lie. What am I talking about? I have a few talks coming up. I'm scaling down my talk tracks and my talks overall, but you will find me at DevNexus. I will be at DevOps Days Rally, and I also will be at OSS Summit. So looking forward to that, and I will be at KubeCon. So see you all there.
Nice.
Michael, why don't you go for it?
Is it me? All right, cool. Hey, what's up, everybody? My name is Michael Levan. I'm self-employed in the Kubernetes and platform engineering space, and I primarily focus on consulting, so working with customers globally, setting up, cloud native and Kubernetes environments, everything and anything content related, blogs, videos, live streams. I also co-host with my good friend Christina Devachko the Kubernetes Unpacked podcast. And I do a ton of live training as well for various vendors. No talks for me coming up. I just started a second business, so I'm rather busy over there. But hopefully later in the year, I will get a couple of talks in.
Awesome. Is it me next?
Yep.
I'll go.
Yeah.
Steve Buchanan here. Let's see. I'm at Microsoft and I'm doing a lot of cloud native stuff as well as some other things. Got to throw the acronym AI in there. Outside of that, I do a lot of stuff in the community, speaking, author of a pool of books. Some are around Kubernetes and hybrid cloud related. Do courses on Pluralsight, one that will be coming out on O'Reilly in the near future. So looking forward to that. And what else? Just excited to be here and be a part of this platform engineering panel.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for the intros.
I think we
I think
missed.
I can still
We-
intro.
yeah, we still have a
I can go
couple.
next, I think.
We have two more.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Cool. All right, I'll go. My name is Kat Morgan. I am on the developer relations team as a community engineer with Pulumi. I've been working on or around platforms for the last approaching 8 years. Oh no, I'm old. And definitely super excited to be here with all of you amazing brains. So it's going to be a fun talk. As far as conferences, I learned last week. Was it last week? Holy cow. The tech energy in Austin is amazing. The tech people there, crazy energetic and engaging. So highly recommend Austin for tech people. And actually got to speak on some Cilium stuff and Pulumi with Marino. So that was a blast. I'm going to have major FOMO watching everyone else go out to KubeCon Paris. I will not make that one, but I'll see you in North America.
Okay, so talking about that, who is going? I know Marino is going and Whitney. So
Do we
who
want to
else is
introduce
going?
Saim as well?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay. How are you? Hope you can able to hear me
Yes.
Yeah, we
correctly.
are.
Thank
Yep.
you. I think I am the only one who actually passes and can say Happy Friday and Happy March.
That's
It
right.
is yes. So let me give you a quick intro of myself. So my name is Saim Safdar. I'm living in Islamabad, Pakistan currently. So I'm also a organizer of Case Study Islamabad that is happening next month, I guess, for the second version of it. And also, I think all of the guests actually appear on my screen instead of Chris and Abdul, who has not appeared on my show, Cloud Native Podcast, but the rest of them, I think Cat is on my wish list of radar for the next pool of guests as well. But all of other actually appeared on my show as well. And I tried to cover a lot of stuff recently in the platform engineering space. And that's got really excited to see how the community is actually working on new set of ideas and how we actually helping to understand what are the challenges developers are facing currently today. So that's actually the part of the last few months is being the cornerstone of the podcast shows. And also, I think after 3-4 days from now, I'm joining Whitney Lee on the YouTube show, and that I'm really excited, looking forward to meeting you again. And that's enough about me. Over to you, Abdul.
Yeah, so so we'll get started about talking about the conferences. I know, Marino, there's one coming up in Toronto, right? Do you want to shout out about that one?
Absolutely. Oh wow, I'm glad you brought that up. And you're local to Toronto too, so I hope to see you there. But I am running Kube Huddle in May 7th, and I hope to see you all there. It's a conference that's not specific to Kubernetes, even though there is like some flavor of it. The real theme for this one is observability, and I believe the talks and schedule will be announced next week because the speakers have been selected, from what I understand, and that's going to be announced very soon. So I'm very excited. I've seen some of the speakers, excited to see a lot of them here at Kube Huddle, and I'm hoping that y'all are going to show up and come learn a little thing or two about observability and how that's weaved into the things we do for platform engineering.
That's great. And then I know we're talking about CNCF coming up. So I was reading Kaslin's blog. She wrote about the CNCF ambassador. So you want to talk about that, because I know a lot of people don't even know what that means, and there's an application and the process. So, and I'm sure quite of the folks here are ambassadors. So talk to you about to us about your experience there.
Yeah, we have quite a few CNCF ambassadors on this call, so folks can get their own opinions as well. But the reason that the blog post now is the CNCF ambassador application is open. So if you are interested in becoming a CNCF ambassador, you might apply to that. The problem that I see for folks is that they don't really know what a CNCF ambassador is. They kind of have a guess that maybe they fit into that niche, but it's kind of hard to tell a lot of the time. On the ambassador application, there are requirements. There's some information about the program there. The post is about my own experience and the way that I explain it to folks when they ask me about the program. And so usually folks are asking about the program. Something I think folks don't understand is that it's really meant to solve a problem that the CNCF has. So the CNCF is a nonprofit organization with the mission of making cloud native ubiquitous. So that means that they have this, we've seen the cloud landscape. There's so many different open source projects on it. And as we all know, open source is people. So each one of those projects has so many people behind it. And then there's all of the people, end users, and all of the people who are trying to learn about things, who come to meetups. They are part of these virtual communities like we're in here. And so they have all of these communities, so many tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of people all across the globe that they want to support in adopting cloud native. But as a nonprofit, they don't exactly have the funds to hire enough people to send somebody to every meetup that happens in cloud native space or anything like that. So in order to support all of these communities, what they do is they find the leaders of these communities, or hopefully the leaders find them, and say, hey, I have this community that I help out, maybe in my area or a virtual one or whatever kind of community support. And then the CNCF makes those leaders ambassadors, meaning that they have a direct connection to the CNCF so that the CNCF can get feedback from them about what their community needs. If there are I've seen a couple of examples is the student at KubeCon came from a CNCF ambassador, wanted to serve students better at KubeCon. The Kids Day that happens at KubeCon, I don't think that one, it might have come from an ambassador, but ambassadors do support that program too. So those things where we can do something to help support a community. A lot of ideas come from and are supported and staffed by ambassadors. So it's not a certification. People think it's like, oh, I know cloud native really well, so I should be awarded the title ambassador. But it's not really an award. It's more of a role that you're fulfilling to help CNCF and the communities that you help.
Okay. And talking about communities, has anybody attended the Kubernetes Virtual Book Club? I know there's a book club that happens on oh, okay. Sure, go talk about it. I'm gonna put the link in there. So
okay. Yeah, I actually attended a couple weeks ago. This is actually funny story, some history here. I actually created the book club channel in the CNCF Slack a few years ago, I think in 2020, because it was the pandemic and everybody was picking up pandemic hobbies. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to do a book club. That's what I'm going to do. Never works every time I try to do. But I did create the channel and then it didn't really go anywhere. But thankfully, another ambassador, Carlo, has, I believe that's right, has picked that up and is running now. He's renamed it to Kubernetes Book Club. So they focus primarily on Kubernetes type books. The last book they did was CKS, the Certified Security Study Guide. And an interesting thing about this book club is I did without doing the reading, as one does with book clubs. And and they basically did an overview of the chapter, was the main content of the book club. And they actually went through the chapter and did the hands-on exercises that were in it, because it's a technical book. So the benefit comes from doing those examples, right? So I actually went through the content of the chapters and did the hands-on exercises together. So that was pretty cool.
How long was that?
I think the meeting's an hour.
Oh wow, cool.
Yeah. On Fridays at 9 a.m. Pacific, I think, is when they are. They're on the Cloud Communities page. Yeah. Well, I run an open source at 8 a.m. every Friday, so
Wow.
I'm free now.
I have put the book club on my calendar to attend twice in the last 2 months, and I'm going to make it on the next one, I swear.
Relatable.
Yeah, and then okay, so talking about that, actually, let's get into our discussion. I know you kind of mentioned Kubernetes, but I want to start our discussions with, since the topic is platform engineering, right? Everybody has their own definition, so let's go across and see what everybody thinks is Power Platform, right? What is your definition? So anybody?
The way I'll start, why not? So I see it like there are different groups of people at an organization. So you have experts who are like, by definition, very good at something, and they should be provisioning some of that stuff for users, just regular people who want to use the stuff. And then the platform engineers sit in between those two groups of people to help users be able to access stuff that experts provision, like define and optimize for them to use. So in my mind, like a platform engineer doesn't have to be exclusively that. They might also provision or define some of those capabilities. But ideally, a platform engineer is the glue, holds it all together.
Love it. Love it.
I think I'll jump in, I guess. Similarly to your definition, Whitney, I think there's folks who are building the thing, and though I increasingly see the folks who are application developers who are building the thing also having to take care of the infrastructure. I hate to see it because infrastructure is such a huge job by itself.
Yeah.
Very large companies, they'll often centralize infrastructure management so that the team that like sets up all Kubernetes clusters and they set up rules so the development teams can't accidentally like run so much on a machine that nobody else can use it, or so that bad things don't happen with the infrastructure without the dev teams having to worry so much about how all of that is set up, because it's quite complicated. We can get into networking, we can get into Kubernetes, we can get into all of the many cloud native tools that could be in this infrastructure. So I think the folks who are running the infrastructure that developers are using to run this stuff and that users are then interacting with, like you said, the folks kind of in the middle there are the platform engineers, because I think I actually really like the term platform. It's been used in Kubernetes for a long time as a platform for running platforms, as some folks have said. The concept of a platform is like a whole bunch of tools and making something that you can build on top of. And so I think that's the central component of what platform engineers do, is infrastructure engineers who put all of the together so that developers can build their applications on top of it and use it.
Okay. And Michael, I know you've already written a book and you're pretty much an expert on this, so I want to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, so I guess I'll ask two questions, maybe three questions, and maybe I'll try to answer them myself so I can speed this thing up and I'm not talking. Kubernetes has been around for 10 years, give or take, publicly, right? Terraform, since like 2011, 2012 maybe. Cloud-based platforms, 2011, 2013. Point being is we've had these technologies for like 15 to 20 to 30 to 40 years. And we still have problems, right? So it's pretty clear that the technology isn't solving anything at all for us. We're kind of just going like this in feedback loops, right? Now we're back on prem and yada, yada, blah, blah, blah. So my thing with platform engineering is this is my belief that it's a role that has one job, and that job is to whatever platform you're building for whatever engineers you're building it for, make sure that that platform is efficient for them, make sure that it works as expected, make sure that everybody's happy with it. You're building a platform for others to use to make their jobs easier. Other than that, like if we're not doing that, we're kind of just doing the same engineering we've been doing for the past 10 to 15 years. So I think it's very much a customer service role above engineering.
Okay. And Kat, you come, you work obviously at Pulumi, which is ISC infrastructure as so talk to us about how does that fit in there, or your experiences.
Yeah. So first off, platform engineering is going to be one of those magical "it depends" things to describe when it comes to like actually understanding what that work product is going to look like for any given organization. But ultimately, a platform engineer is solving a problem, and the problem is use computers, right? Because the way we do it ends up being really, really complicated, and you need expertise for that. Now, that expertise can live on all kinds of different planes of the industry ladder. So platform engineering might be developing AWS. That is a platform, right? It got so big that now we also brought platform engineers in-house who specialize in understanding AWS and can consolidate the complexity of using AWS into something consumable and operational for the actual value add of the company, which is their application, right? So like when it comes down to the strategy for each organization, that's going to look wildly different depending on what they actually need from computers, from the cloud, right? But on the whole, like Michael said, you're basically a product team at that point. You're producing a product that others inside your organization can consume.
Yeah, and I'll jump in there next and kind of talk about what it means to me, how I would define it. So kind of taking a piggyback on the product management piece, but to Michael's point, we've been serving platforms out for a very long time, right? That part's not new. Like the stuff we have now wouldn't exist if we didn't have platforms for the technology to run on, right? So platform engineering is taking the technology stacks that we have and the workflows and bundling that together and treating that as a product. So taking a product management approach to serving all of that to essentially customers, and those customers should be developers or they could be other folks. Like I've been on projects in the past where, Kubernetes, specifically AKS, was that platform with a bunch of different add-ons, maybe ingress controllers, service mesh, and other things wrapped in there that, developers or even application owners were coming to consume so they could run their applications on top of that. So platform engineering is doing what we've been doing for a while, but taking a product management approach to it and then serving it out to our customers.
Okay, great. And Marino, talk to us about your experience. I know you also host a space on X, and you talk about, so yeah, give us your experience.
I want to go back in time a little bit because the things that we do in platform engineering today are very resemblant of the things we used to do when code wasn't influential in the way we provision stuff. I'm writing a blog post on namespace as a service because way back when developers wanted access to compute or real estate, what would happen, right? If we didn't have virtual machines, I'd be calling up my vendor and saying, hey, can you send me some hardware, right? And it would take like a few weeks before it showed up, and then I've got to patch it or image it, patch it, do all the fun stuff, get it ready for the network, and then once it's ready, add it to the domain because we were a Windows shop way back then, and then give access, right? But the lead time and the procurement time added up and was detrimental to the delivery of a feature or a product, right? And that's important. So how did we arrive at platform engineering? A lot of that was influenced by automation. We were automating the way we would provision infrastructure, the way we would deploy virtual machines, the way we would package them up in templated forms and have the right set of NICs, the right IP addresses, the host names, all that fun stuff, storage, everything attached all together so that it was ready, right? So we're evolving, and we got to this point where it's just easier to hand off an API to developers and allow them that self-service approach. But the one thing that I need to call out is that while Google, for example, has been doing this forever as a platform and treating what they do as a platform, other cloud providers as well, the biggest consideration is that folks that didn't want to use the cloud tried to do the same thing. Ever heard of a company called Tanzu and VMware, which is where Whitney's from? I used to work there too. And they offered a platform. They gave a platform-like experience to not developers, but operators. Operators had like unlimited access to different APIs that they can control things and provide the right infrastructure just in time when required. Now, fast forward to today, that's no different than what we're trying to do, what we tried to do back then and what we're doing today. The largest difference is we're doing this across different kinds of real estate, across different kinds of workloads, and we have different requirements. So there isn't a one size fits all that makes this possible. And that's why we're seeing an approach to either building your own platform or picking something that's off the shelf that's working really well. And that's why we have Kat from Pulumi to talk about that option, or something that's already fully thought out, which might be Google Cloud, or something that has existed to bridge the gap between on-premises and hybrid, the cloud, which is where Tanzu comes in. And then there's something in between, right? Like think about a company like Rafe, for example. I'm going off and pontificating a little bit, but I worked with Rafe in the edge compute space. So when you have real estate as small as edge compute, and you have requirements that say, maybe I don't want to use the fullness of the cloud or the entirety of the cloud, and I want something a little bit more specific and niched in. Well, Rafe's container management solution comes in, right? It's just the way you look at it and the needs and the requirements that you have up front, plus the budget that you're working with and your timelines.
Yeah. And that being said, I guess I'll step back and ask a question is maybe for the people, what is the difference between DevOps and platform engineering, right? Sometimes those terms are intermixed, or sometimes we go back and forth. So anybody want to take a stab at that? I see Kat.
Okay. So like right before getting on, I totally came up with this yeehaw explanation, and you'll get that description in a second. So I'm from Oklahoma. I have like had horses and cows and all that stuff. And for me, platform engineering is versus DevOps is the difference between training a horse and riding the horse. So basically, at some point, you have to tame the beast, right? Like compute is a really like crazy thing to wrangle with all of the different specs and compatibility and architecture and networking and power required. Just it's a beast, right? So you have to tame that somehow. Somebody's got to do it. If it's a small enough thing that doesn't require a full-time role or an entire team to do the platform engineering role, then it can all fit in the DevOps hat, right? But the moment that your DevOps requirements grow beyond the ability for the ops, the app delivery side of the house to actually be able to deliver their app, that's when you need to, regroup who's going to be responsible for the platform engineering piece so that the DevOps people can maintain their velocity without being bogged down by all the needs of crazy horses and feeding them. And I'll shut up now.
I'm next.
Go ahead, Saim.
Yes, I think like this is a very natural question because on the CNCF side, we're working on last year putting together 2 white paper. One is called Platform Definition White Paper. Another one we're writing up is around Platform Maturity Model. And this question is quite generally often very much a lot. And I can tell you my story as well, because back in the 2016, 2017 timeframe, when I working with a company, one of my first company, my first job was to actually operationalize the development space. So basically in the morning time, we have developers who create new feature for the application. And at night, we have some customers who are using it. So, there's what's going on. There's a lot of issue comes up, and we don't have a strategy at that time. How do we able to actually fix the issues on the fly? So I try to actually guess, like it might be the issue in the front end, and I just need to fix it, and then eventually I deploy it to the production system without ever thinking about there are a bunch of 20,000 line of code that is also stitched together in the same umbrella, and I'm deploying it out. And sometimes it's broke horrifically, and the morning start, and some people are shouting at me like, what the hell you do? So that was in 2016, 2017. And then I think there's a natural fit. We have to differentiate between environment. There should be a dev testing and staging environment. We came up with a strategy, but the next obvious question is actually come in your mind. We have to automate this thing. Other than that, this will be an unmaintainable job for everyone. So we create a DevOps philosophy within the team, but I think it works wonderfully well within the one team. But as for the organization, we have 4,000 developers and 10 different DevOps team and 20 different tooling. Then DevOps is kind of a nightmare, because you literally have not 400 developers and 10 DevOps engineer. There is a clear mismatch of the number here. So I think what platform engineering is trying to do, instead of fighting on the tooling side to do a job, let's do a standardization. And I did a podcast last time, I think 1 month back, I think two weeks back, with a guy named uh, Brian from VMware Tanzu, and he is speaking about two very important concepts I haven't heard about before. He said diffusion of innovation and the Conway's law. So that's pretty much the difference between the DevOps and the platform engineering. Because in the platform engineering, let's say the diffusion of innovation, all it says within the organization, all of the individual working in the company are not going to accept the change immediately. Some will actually tells you why we need to do this stuff, what are the beneficial for it. But some let's go straight on it and jump on it. They want to be a cutting edge or the bleeding edge. So they are the early innovator or the early adopters. And then you see, if you move the needle beyond, then the adoption stops, because after 15% within the organization, the rest of the organization doesn't accept the necessary changes. So what you do, you have to include the early adopter into the picture and let them understand within the organization what's this come up in the picture. So I think there's a two major things, because I think in DevOps time, when you start doing the DevOps in 2016, 2017, one thing you notice within the organization, your communication skills, your communication internally is becoming granularly good enough. So communication style is brave enough as compared to the before. Within the platform engineering, I think if you do platform engineering in a good way, then you start talking about the what are the one problem within the organization that multiple teams are facing, and we want to have a standardization and not competing on the tool, but the competing on the methodology of how the orchestration of the flow works within the organization.
That's great. Thanks for that. Yeah, and that actually leads up to another question is sometimes platform engineering is synonymous to Kubernetes. So, uh, is that true or not? Michael, what are your thoughts?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I don't really think that platform engineering has anything to do with Kubernetes. Whether I'm running bare metal workloads or virtualized workloads, or I'm running containers on ECS or Azure Container Apps, or I'm running Kubernetes or Nomad or whatever, you can pretty much do the same thing more or less, right? Orchestration is orchestration at the end of the day. APIs are different, underlying platform is different, but overall, the things that you can do, which is essentially the gist is self-service capabilities, right? Like that's platform engineering in the whole is self-service capabilities, which again we've had for 15 to 20 plus years, right? But you can do that anywhere, as long as an API is available, and as long as you can write some type of CLI or put a front end, whatever you're going to put in front of it, some type of self-service capability. It doesn't matter what the underlying platform is. Arguably, the engineers that are consuming the platform, whether it's developers or cybersecurity or IT or whoever, they shouldn't even know really what the underlying platform is. So if it's running on bare metal or on Kubernetes, it should kind of be irrelevant.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Whitney, from your aspect, I know with Palzo and VMware, talk to us about that experience. Um,
Well, I I spend a lot of time learning about CNCF tools and technologies and hosting shows, but I don't spend a ton of time within the Tanzu product. So I could say like when you're evaluating a tool to use, whether it's Tanzu or any other tool, you want to make sure none of these tools should be one size fits all. You want to make sure that it's highly customizable for the needs of your particular organization.
okay, and talking about tools, I know there's so many different tools. So what are the challenges? Like, how can people even learn those tools and different kind of tools? Because as you said, everybody's going to be using different tools.
Yeah. Well, so platform engineering, as I think Michael said toward the beginning, it has a lot to do with communication. It has a lot to do with figuring out what the needs are. What's the next place where you can make a big difference, a tool that makes a big difference. So you start small and then you iterate. And so you don't need to know every tool right out of the gate. You need to just be like, hey, where are our users having a problem? What can we provide for those users that will help solve the problem? Let's make a small version of that. Let's roll it out. Let's get some feedback, and then let's do it again. Let's make it bigger and better, or let's move on to the next problem to solve. So the overwhelming nature of the CNCF or of tooling in general is definitely important to acknowledge. But I think it's also important to acknowledge that you just need the sandwich is huge, but you just need to take one little bite at a time. You can get there,
Yeah. And Marino, from your aspect, talk to us about, vendor, because I guess it's open, right? So how does that fit in from one end, vendor lock-in, or there are obviously different vendors as well? What's your experience on that?
So you have to consider what vendor lock-in actually offers, right? On one hand, people get scared because there's a lot of additional work to move away from that particular vendor. You've spent a lot of efforts from an engineering standpoint, even from a knowledge standpoint. You've invested so much time and effort to learn this technology, and then to pick up and move on to something else is a lot of effort. It's costly, right? But let's look at the other angle for a second with respect to vendor lock-in from the realms of stableness and stability, and just making sure that when you're looking for an experience, you now know you need to just go to one person, right? So that's what VMware was for the longest time. When it started off with vSphere, guess who you called when things went wrong? You wouldn't call some random company. You would call VMware. Their GSS support system, extraordinary folks, by the way, extraordinary engineers, would jump in there and be able to troubleshoot anything. Now, granted, as the organization grew with many, many other technologies that were added into what they call the software-defined data center, and then you add in some other lines of businesses, and then Kubernetes enters the chat, that's an immense scale, right? That's a lot to consider. And here's the other thing, right? VMware acquired some of these companies as well. So the integrations weren't always clean. Because they're not always clean, Now you start to think about other situations or conditions where for an end user, how much more work does that mean for me to be able to maintain this, right? And so in that realm, vendor lock-in can be bad, but it also can be good too, as long as you continue to partner with someone like VMware and continue that journey down the road, because you're the feedback conduit, in the sense that you're testing out all this stuff and then you're telling VMware, hey, this is what works, what doesn't work. Here's how you can make this better, because this is real world data that we're actioning a lot of our workloads against. And now you can improve upon the product. So there are goods and bads to it, right? It really depends. It's always going to depend on your available funding, some of your project requirements, and the direction of where your business needs to go. Now, I mean, I could go on for hours, but I'll stop.
No, that's good. And Steve, coming to you, like from a AKS standpoint or even Microsoft standpoint, right? Where does platform engineering fit? I know it's not really specific to a specific platform, but kind of talk about that experience.
Yeah, so that's a great question. Like AKS is used often, right, in platform engineering stacks. So I mean, it's a given, along with a lot of other like Azure services and even Microsoft technologies. We don't have a platform engineering product per se, but a lot of Microsoft products are used in platform engineering. From a Microsoft standpoint, we do have the platform engineering guide that was released at the last Ignite, and so we have some opinionated views on platform engineering, and I'd highly recommend folks check that out. But yeah, we don't. There's no specific like tool, and when it comes to tools for platform engineering and learning those tools, chances are just you're already running platforms, right? So there's already a bunch of tools that you're using today to serve whoever your customer is, those developers or application owners. Layering platform engineering on top of that, what you're already doing, serving out those platforms, is really about kind of taking that approach and that mindset of, hey, I'm gonna manage this platform or these platforms as a product, and then layering on like maybe an IDP, right? So that now your developers have a shopping experience where they can come and like select a platform. And so for folks that want to get into platform engineering, I would argue that you're already doing it, right? Maybe minus a couple of things, like maybe you need to go learn an IDP like Backstage or one of the other common ones out there. Maybe you aren't doing Kubernetes today. Maybe you need to learn that, and you might serve platform engineering without Kubernetes even.
I'm going to speak up real quick, actually, just to call out what Marino said. He kind of glossed over it real quick, but he included that detail about the feedback loop, right? When you're building a platform to be consumed, whether that's something that you're selling or something that's being consumed internally in your organization, that feedback loop where you're actually engaging with your customers internally or externally and making sure that what you build is, helping, right? That's one of the most critical parts of platform engineering. So I wanted to, 2 thumbs up for what Marino said.
And to tie that in with what Steve said, like if you want to become a platform engineer, the technology part's important, but communication is wildly important for that reason. Yeah.
Yeah, when you try to meet all the needs of a bunch of different people in one organization, you're going to find that you just picked the hardest job of them all.
So I got to ask a question. Steve, you mentioned IDP, right? So, I'm like identity management, and I'm thinking identity platform. But for folks who don't know, like what does IDP really mean in this platform engineering stance?
So I know there's some back and forth out there around it, but internal developer portal. I don't know if anyone else has another other words that they use for IDP. feel free to chime in.
It was internal developer platform in
Yes.
my head. Yeah. But there is identity provider. If the D is a lowercase d, then it's identity provider. But if it's an uppercase D, then it's internal developer platform.
It's just getting too complicated. I can't do it.
I quit. Yeah.
It's almost
know
like,
the
is
acronym?
there a dash or isn't there a dash in some project? I won't go there.
So with
I
that
don't
being
know
said,
I don't know the
Yeah.
acronym, but I feel like every time I hear one of those, it's like, oh, it's solving that problem.
and Saim, coming to you now, what are you seeing from adoption standpoint?
Yes, I think like I can talk about one, as IDP is one of the most confused term I think in the industry right now. And what the company is speaking with them is like they call IDP as a unified developer platform. And I get crazy, like, great, you actually excluded the I incredibly well. So some call it currently, I might believe some people is trying to do a UDP way as well. But UDP, I think, is a networking protocol as well.
Yes.
Yep,
That is
yep.
also tough. Platform engineering is tough with acronyms.
So now we have UDPs instead of IDPs. Okay. Michael,
I didn't get that.
Michael calling you out. He threw out self-service, and that's really what it's about, right? I don't know if you want to speak to that more, Michael, but I love that. Like it's really about self-service, right? You're putting something in front of those developers or maybe app owners or whoever it is to facilitate that self-service, and that's really what it is. Whether it's an IDP or now we have UDPs, might be something else that comes out tomorrow.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I guess my terminology isn't all that great because I feel like we're always giving like the same thing new names, right? And throwing some marketing jargon in front of it. So I try to stay away from the buzziness, but yeah, it's self-service, right? Like you look at any of the IDPs, it's all just self-service capabilities.
So how do you solve the problem of self-service? Like it's harder to control. So maybe having the problem of, sure, you could put up guardrails so you can't provision like a database that's too big or that's not going to use too many resources. But sometimes when it's super duper easy, then you're just like, oh, I'll just provision something real quick. Like you don't understand maybe how much it costs the organization. How do you put up guardrails around that part of it?
Yes, I think like Whitney, what you said, I think if you look at some of the content on the IWP side as well, it's like it's look very good on theory, but when you start doing it practically, it's really a challenge because remember we talk about the dev and ops silos in the past, like devs doing their own things and then they put something configuration on the fly and then the ops team actually figuring it out what says in there and they literally wrestle with the developers to make them available in the production because why I started my career off because we're developing applications locally on the Windows system, but on the production system this is usually a Linux. All the production system I have on that time is a Linux base. So that we don't understand how the protocols and the networking and the port mapping works on the Linux because we did it on the Windows machine. And there's some difference between both of the operating systems. So it's one of the challenging there. So we remove the dev and ops silos by creating a DevOps. So, and now with the Docker, I think we kind of get pretty much good at unifyingly distributing the application and containerizing it. I think this is not going to challenge anywhere. But on the IDP side, there's a challenge because if you are building an IDP today, what you're doing is you're saying, I have application that I actually deploying for my customers. And I see sometime downtime, not just because of the technology, because of the skill set that is lacking within the company. So how do I actually can upskill my individual? I can create an IDP. So now some skepticism says, now you're doing an app development and plus IDP development. And IDP is not one of the things that can tell you you are doing good or bad. It takes time to understand what are you doing is actually beneficial for the company or not. And what you're doing is actually a cost. There are some costs associated with it. And then you need to uh, understand how I structure my team. Do you need, because IDP is developed like any other platform, any other product. You have a developer, you have tester, you have DevOps team. So do you need two DevOps team? That is, one is going a IDP, building an IDP, and one is managing the application. So how do you align the organization structure? That is another challenge. And plus, if you try to do IDP and build it up, then you actually kind of a silos again, because now your dev is not communicating and your only platform engineer is actually giving you the tooling, and you say or no, is not, you are getting rid of liberty of choosing your own tooling, because that's what already have. You have to actually run and experiment with it. So I think there are some misconfiguration, some of the things we haven't even thought about, and we need more time to think about it.
Can I just play devil's advocate if nobody minds? So like a lot of the things that we're discussing, right, based off of the IDP discussion is, a lot of what if this person needs something? What if they need to be able to spin up this environment? What if they need this permission? What if they spin up too big of an environment? What if they don't have the permission to spin it down? What if they don't have the permission to spin it up? What do they need to do? How do they need to do it? How is the IDP going to help them? And that's kind of what I was saying in the beginning of like why I don't like technology isn't going to solve the problem. Like everything that we're talking about right now is a people problem. And if from a platform engineering perspective, if we're thinking about it as a customer service role, like it's our job as platform engineers to go to each team and say, okay, who needs what? And then we have to think, is it acceptable or not? And then we have to think about who needs the permissions, right? Because not everybody's getting root. So I don't know. I'm a firm believer that if we just had a little bit more communication and discussion around what was necessary for everybody to be able to do their job, versus assuming, we would be able to get a heck of a lot more done.
I think that comes back to a platform being a platform as a product and having a product manager involved and having a people problem, tons of communication with that team. And I'll say something else to what Saim said. Saim said, like they're rolling out tooling. Like, I think it's important that tooling is optional. Like if there's a product out in the world, it's your choice whether you want to buy that product or whether you don't. Like in an organization, it should be a choice whether or not you use the tools that are offered by the platform or whether you don't. And then the platform teams also, if no one's using their tools, they're getting some feedback right there that they're not making the right tools for everyone. And I think that's an important part of the feedback loop.
Self-service capabilities. That's it.
Optional self-service. Yeah.
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So I guess let's talk about what skill sets are required. Like I know with platform engineering and even with Kubernetes and all that, networking is pretty much very heavy lifting, right? What other skill set people should have to be successful in this role?
I'd say I'll throw automating out there. So and pick your scripting language, tooling, but automating in general is a big one.
I would definitely say good old systems administration. I mean, like my career, like I started out in systems administration and then I moved into software engineering. And then I found myself in the DevOps or SRE realm, whatever you want to call it. But like the sysadmin skills that I learned like 14 years ago, I still use them literally every day. Like whenever I'm building any type of environment, I'm still using those skills that I learned 14 years ago. And I'm still also using the development skills, right? But I feel like I'm using more of the sysadmin skills.
And then Michael, you mentioned SRE, right? So I guess that was a buzzword a couple of years ago. We still hear that, but I guess it's fading out now as we start seeing more of platform engineering. So can you kind of talk about that as well?
Yeah, so like I know we were talking about the DevOps versus platform engineering thing before, and I try my best to always stay out of that debate because whatever, go fight with HR about the titles. But like from what I see or from how I perceive it, right? Platform engineering is about dealing with systems. DevOps is about dealing with application deployments and system deployments, right? But application deployments, SRE is about overall performance. But you're going to have bits and pieces of that everywhere, right? Like if you're a platform engineer and you don't care about performance, you're not doing your job properly. But that's at least how I differentiate the three. Just because there's so many titles right now, like I need a way in my brain to differentiate it somehow. So that's how I split it up in my head.
We say it one more time.
Sure. Yeah. So DevOps, application deployments, platform engineering, systems, SRE, performance.
Yeah. And then Kat, coming to you with Pulumi, right? It's automation. It's mainly automation, but what else like are you seeing from a platform engineering, or talk to us about that piece?
Yeah. So, I mean, as far as like choosing a tool for the backbone of your platform engineering work, I mean, obviously I'm biased because I believed in Pulumi before I joined the company. So I'm a big fan of that. Ultimately, if you are progressing from ClickOps into automation and then into orchestration, which is more declarative rather than that imperative automation workflow, so long as you're moving towards the goal, and of course that is my camera just deciding to take a smoke break. So long as you're moving towards that end result of really accelerating the people problems by reducing the technical lift and fatigue for consuming a platform and doing useful things with compute. Recognize that progression that you're making and celebrate it because it's a big lift. But then once you're like actually practiced as a platform team for the like bridging the gap between the DevOps side, the app side, and that platform team so that you all share an understanding of how your organization organizes code, communicates when negotiation needs to take place, because everything is some give and take. When you discover something that an app team needs and doesn't have, are you writing a bunch of emails, scheduling a bunch of Zoom calls, or are you waiting on a PR for ages, right? That's all business process people stuff. And it is the thing that is going to determine, regardless of your tool selections and technologies, whether or not you're successful. I'm going to try and restart my camera.
And Marina, coming to you now, like I know you go and talk to a lot of conferences and about different tools, right? So what's your experience has been so far?
Experience. Oh, this is an interesting one because experience is always going to be, interesting. When it comes to some of the tooling that I've run into, right? Like, okay, service meshes is one, CNI is a second one, and those are key functions of an infrastructure stack. But when you think about who actually consumes these technologies, they're platform teams, and when they're consuming it, they're not digging into a service mesh. They're not digging into a CNI and configuring the little bits and pieces. They're actually configuring desired state. They need to explain to the system, or they need to explain to their entire application stack, this is how I want you to look like. Go do it. Just make it possible, right? And why that's important is if we go back to like that 15 years ago, kind of setting up networks and stuff, we actually did things very statically. There was no just-in-time concept to be able to bend towards things like latency concerns or outages or scale issues, right? We can do that today. We can do that not because of like Istio or Cilium or any of these technologies. They're there. We can do this today because of technologies like Argo, right? We can do this because of technologies that tie into automation. that abstract away real estate. That's important, right? Abstracting away real estate makes this entirely possible as well. But there aren't a lot of tools that can do that for us. So we have to think about automation patterns. And then we also have to compromise. We have to accept that we have to build for failure. We have to know that things are gonna fail, and we build around it, right? That is the SRE mindset just brought into platform engineering. The only difference is there's much more automation. And oh, by the way, the drive and need to get to Heroku. And I'm sorry I had to say it, but I just had to say it because that's exactly where I feel like we're going.
So I'd love to jump in there and kind of piggyback off Heroku. The experience in Heroku from a developer's side is, I mean, it's pretty awesome. To go from your code to it running and not have to worry about the infrastructure, that stuff's just taken care of for you. I think with platform engineering, like that's what we're trying to get to is that experience, but that experience internally for our developers and app owners.
Okay, and I want to actually get some thoughts from Kaslin. I know she's been kind of quiet, but what are your thoughts, especially with JKS and on that side?
With regard to just kind of platform engineering,
Right.
There's so much there. I think, like folks have been saying, word is self-service. So the old goal, like Steve was just saying, a platform engineer is to make using the infrastructure as simple as possible for their users, who are generally the developers within the organization. And of course, we've talked a little bit about the tool bloat that platform engineers have to deal with. Actually, back to one thing that Whitney said earlier, the question you asked earlier about like, how do we convey to the users of this? One thing that I often find a little bit confusing when I'm explaining platform engineering is that I'm talking about engineers whose users are engineers, but making sure that the users of the platform understand what they're doing. And one I've heard from a lot of folks who are platform engineers who are building platforms, or as we were talking about earlier, is making that cost more transparent to the end users. So I've heard ideas around like making the cost really visible, like you're going to spend a VM, this is how much it costs. But another issue with that, of course, is that like what level organizationally are those things build at? You may give that information to a developer, but they may have no concept of how that fits into the organization's budget. And so that's another issue that a lot of engineers are dealing with. So it's kind of organizational issue of how you make a workflow that works for your specific organizational structure, make it as easy as possible for those engineers to get their work done.
Makes sense. And then, Michael, I'll come back to you and ask the question: where do you see the future of platform engineering?
Oh, I'm sorry. Are we asking me or?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
No, sorry. I thought you said you were coming back, and that confused me.
That's right.
Sorry. Yeah. So, I mean, I personally think that if it's going to be done right, it'll be more of a customer-centric, product-focused role. Still engineering, right? But with the mindset of communication between teams, the mindset of thinking about what you're building as a product versus, just something that you're pushing out. I think that if it's done wrong, it'll unfortunately just kind of go into the title soup in the HR drawer, and that's just what it'll be. That's my take on it.
Anybody else?
Yes, I think I can try to jump in here is very quick here, because I think one thing I try to relate here in this platform engineering discussion is that I think in 2020, when I started doing some sort of production stuff on Kubernetes, and we actually on that time is having a very much task of doing a zero downtime deployment in the production system, and we're figuring out a solution for it. And then I try to understand that Kubernetes is one of the most stable solution for this to do it. but I can understand the grasp easily. But in order to demo this thing to the customers and the developers, it's a pain. It's literally a pain to setting up entire cluster and with pods, with replica set, with deployment, just to show them how the zero downtime deployment works. So this is one of the challenge I got in 2020, just to get people understand what the feature this technology give you. You have to remove the discussion and you have people start telling you, oh, this is so much, there's a deployment, there's a replica set, there is blah blah blah. We love the feature, but this is not how we're supposed to do the zero downtime deployment. And that is exactly the same for platform engineering. People love what we talk about, but when you go back to the developers and let them understand this is how the platform engineering and the stuff works, they'll kind of fade it away. The things is good, but it requires a lot of timing. It's required a lot of vocabulary to be grasped wonderfully well. And some of the developers is actually, as back to I started the discussion on, the diffusion of innovation is really important here, because the platform engineering right at the beginning is not for everyone. There has to be step within the organization, somebody who are actually an early adopter. That's where you started from, and those early adopters will internally communicate within the organization of benefit of this technology, and that's how this replicate within the organization, why these things actually useful for the organization. And I speak with a lot of the, I think on the Docker side as well. When Docker initially came up, some of the early adopters actually start using it, develop Docker methodology of container shipping in 2014. And those initial developer will pave the way for rest of the community and rest of the organization to make them understand that this thing has very much variable, unique set of feature, and then rest of the community start adopting it. So I think it's kind of a difficult, is not for everyone, not for the all of the startup out there. You just to have to carefully evaluate what are the what are the common challenges exist within the requirement. Those are the early adopter within the organization who can go forward with this journey.
Sounds good. Thanks, Sam, for that. And for the folks listening in, feel free to give ask any questions in the chat for our panel.
So I have something to say about the future of platform engineering. I think there are a couple of things we already discussed at length. So platform as a product, the customers are treated as customers of the platform. I think communication is so super important part. But then I see a lot of people thinking a platform is a web portal and or a platform is a service catalog. And so I think the future of platform engineering is for people to realize that it's so much more than those things. You can offer a comprehensive solution that's not just a single service. And you can offer that solution not just through a web portal, but through IDE plugins, through code templates, through APIs, through CLIs. There are a lot of different ways to access all of the capabilities that you're supplying to the developers. And those interfaces should be right where the developers are when they need to use that capability. And I think that's how platforms are going to grow and evolve.
That's good.
Awesome.
Chris,
So I
looks
was
like you
going
have
to
a
ask
question.
it, yeah, if you don't mind. One of the things Saim, you mentioned about folks looking to get into this environment. So where, like, if you had one thing to tell anybody who is listening to like where to start, where to really focus, where would that be?
With what goal?
Just like getting into platform engineering, like somebody new really wanted to start with this, based on any experience that they had. Like, where would you start, or where would you recommend they start?
Start with what is within your grasp.
Yeah.
So if you have a passion for a certain type of technology, whether that's just writing Docker files, or maybe that's weird to you and you already know you can be okay on the terminal with some basic bash, move into Docker files, right? Because that's your next closest iterative step. But whatever you're close to or have access to, like to tap someone on the shoulder or something like that, start with what's achievable and use that as a building block to build up towards the grand goal. Because even the people who are, kings of the platform engineering, DevOps world, they only know what's in their, domain. And there's so much more to platform engineering. So start like that. That's the best first advice is you don't have to pick the best starting place, but pick a starting place and start.
Love that. Anybody else want to add to that?
I think like if you ask the same question from the company side of it, like if you ask the same question as aspect of the company, if company are, is it good for company to investing on building the platform like IDP or buying the IDP? So I think I try to start from this. I think one of the things I really learned from the recent podcast as well, one of the guests is saying like, I think it would be ideal if you set up a one room dedicated and put everyone within the one room. DevOps, platform engineer, developers, tester, sales enablement engineer, product manager, or marketing people, and give them a sticky note and ask them what are the one common problem that everybody is facing, and then go into the board and stick on there, and then look at the entire board. What one common problem is everybody is facing, and what are the different sticky notes that has approval in it. So if most of the sticky notes are asking you, there are approvals required, then it's kind of this is a natural fit that you can start investigating at least for an IDP. So that is for the organizational aspect of it. But as an individual, as I alluded to the earlier, so it's a natural fit that platform engineering come from a company that has 400, 500, or 1,000 of the developers, that where they feel a really stress because they're working with a lot of the DevOps pipeline, and those pipelines are configured via different tooling and different practices. So they're trying to understand, is there a standardized way or unique way that remove the cognitive load from the developers and the DevOps team, so they basically make sure that the feature is actually going into the hands of the user as soon as possible, because that is actually the requirement of the business. So you have to make changes, the necessary feedback in front of the customers. So I think for the individual, it's look like not we actually understand where what should be the one criteria. For the organizational perspective, we have to try. I think we have doing some research. There are some certain patterns already out there.
Could I chime in if that's okay?
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of like just getting started, I would say server stuff, right? Linux, and grab a programming language. So for example, Server Plus by CompTIA, you don't have to get the cert. You can look up Professor Mezer videos. You can look up all the free courses on YouTube, tons of free content. You can buy the book, whatever, read through that, watch that, whatever. Again, you can go the paid route or the free route. Same thing with Linux. There's like a bunch of free boot camps for Linux, or you can look at the various Linux Plus stuff, and then pick a language, right? Maybe Python. Start out with Go if you're feeling that you want to go in that direction. Again, there's a bunch of free stuff out there, but if you get one programming language and you understand the concepts of object-oriented, if you understand the overall server infrastructure layers, scalability, all that, and then if you understand Linux to a certain extent, all of this stuff is going to come way easier to you. Because at least in my opinion, like when I first hopped into the cloud or when I first got into all these platforms, it was just kind of like, oh, okay, this is the thing we were doing X amount of years ago. It just has a different name on it and a different UI on top. But I think those core fundamentals, like if you focus on those 3 core fundamentals, everything's going to be way more fluent for you.
Anybody else?
Would you also add networking in there?
Yeah, sorry. I usually like throw that in the infrastructure system layer. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I mean, I'm a firm believer, and Marino and I have spoken about this a couple of times, and we even spoke about it on a podcast as well. Like, if you like 80% of everything that you're going to do is network related. And regardless of where you are, ports are ports, firewalls are firewalls, routers are routers, switches are switches, IP addresses are IP addresses, CIDRs are CIDRs, right? Like, it doesn't matter where you are, on-prem, in the cloud, in Kubernetes, doesn't matter. It's all the same stuff all over the place. So yeah, Steve, to your point, throw in a Network Plus book in there too if you like. If you're feeling that you want to go in a different direction, you can look up like a CCNA or something. Again, you don't have to get the certs, right? You just study the material, and you'll be pretty solid.
Awesome. Great feedback. Anybody else? Pretty good.
I'll throw in some advice from Ian Coldwater. Earlier this year, they posted on Zitter, whatever we're calling that platform, and said some lines of, if you're feeling overwhelmed by the number of things that you have to do, try starting literally anywhere. It'll be better than just sitting there thinking about all of the different things that you could do. So the best thing you can do is pick something to start with and do something with it. Once you've made some progress, you can ask questions that you learned from that first thing. But the issue and where people really get tripped up is when they try to make a plan at the start, and then the plan just expands and expands and expands, and they know nothing. So start literally anywhere.
Make a habit instead of a plan, and figure out how to enjoy the time you spend learning, and then you'll keep doing it. And then the sky's the limit.
Love that. Love. All right. I think we have time for one last question. This is like a quick fire round. So going around the horn, maybe we'll start with Kaslin. But like 20, 30 seconds, if there was one thing that all of our viewers could take away from today's session, what would it be?
Platform engineering is self-service. Enabling engineers to do the things that they want to do.
Platform engineering is a lot about people and a lot about communication.
Platform engineering is all about the networking.
Which is not unrelated to people.
Platform engineering is going to be all about what's on the menu and making that consumable. And what's on the menu is in the API. So keep those APIs rolling.
And unique to your organization too, yeah.
And I'll add that chances are you are already doing platform engineering and you already have platform engineering skills, minus maybe the IDP part of it, right? Or maybe you're already running a service catalog. So let's just throw that in there.
Yeah, all I got is customer service and a product mindset.
That's a good one. Oh, Saim, you're muted.
Oh, so I think platform engineering is not all about creating UIs. It's about caring for the future for the developers.
Love that.
Love it. All right. Thank you all. This has been fantastic. Seriously. We couldn't have done this without you. We appreciate your time, your insights, your knowledge, your skills. Abdul, any parting thoughts, parting words?
No, just thank you for the panel. I know everybody is busy and taking time, and especially Saim, I know it's really, I guess it's early morning for you now, so thanks for coming on. And other folks have different time zones, but yeah, this was great. I personally learned quite a bit, and hopefully we'll have you again sometime to talk about more of this topic as it evolves.
Awesome. Well, thank you all again. Thank you to our viewers, and please subscribe to Come Cloud with Us. We'll see you next time. Take care, everybody.